Welcome back to our Reddit cheating stories. Subscribe and let's dive in. The clatter of cutlery and the murmur of polite conversation were a constant, unwelcome soundtrack to Lila's new life. 6 months ago, she would have been on the other side of this equation, a pampered guest at a restaurant like Le Fleur, not a waitress balancing precariously with a tray laden with delicate plates. 6 months ago, she was Lila Hayes, fiancé of the brilliant and devastatingly handsome Ethan Sterling, heir to the Sterling Enterprises fortune. Now, she was just Lila. The memory, a jagged shard of glass in her heart, still burned with the intensity of a fresh wound. She'd walked in on them, Ethan and her supposed best friend, Chloe Bennett, tangled together in Ethan's study, their faces flushed with guilt and something else, something she didn't want to name. The words they uttered, the stammered excuses, the crocodile tears, were meaningless against the stark reality of their betrayal. Ethan had tried. He'd begged, pleaded, promised it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. He'd offered explanations that twisted and turned like a desperate snake, but Lila had seen the truth in his eyes, a flicker of something cold and calculating, a confirmation that this wasn't a one-time lapse. It was a reflection of a deeper flaw in his character. Chloe, the viper in her own garden, had offered a different kind of apology, one dripping with condescension. She hinted that Lila was too naive, too trusting, that Ethan needed someone more sophisticated, more like her. Lila had walked away, not with a dramatic scene, but with a quiet, terrifying resolve. She'd returned the ring, a sparkling symbol of a love that had never existed, and packed a single suitcase. The luxury apartment, the designer clothes, the promise of a life of ease and privilege, she left it all behind. She needed to escape, to breathe air that wasn't tainted with their lies. She found herself in a small, anonymous apartment in a less-than-glamorous part of the city. The only job she could find was at Le Fleur, a restaurant that catered to the very elite she had once belonged to. The irony wasn't lost on her. The first few weeks were a blur of exhaustion and humiliation. Her hands, used to typing on a laptop and delicately turning the pages of a novel, were now blistered and sore from carrying heavy trays. She stumbled over complicated orders, spilled wine on expensive clothes, and endured the thinly veiled condescension of the wealthy patrons. But beneath the exhaustion and the embarrassment, a new feeling began to stir, anger. Not just at Ethan and Chloe, but at herself, for being so blind, so trusting, so utterly foolish. And with that anger came a determination, a burning desire to not just survive, but to thrive, to become someone they would never recognize. Lila. Table 6 is waiting, the head waiter, a stern man named Antoine, barked, snapping her out of her reverie. She plastered a smile on her face, carefully balanced her tray, and walked towards the waiting customers, a silent vow echoing in her mind, they would regret what they did. They would learn that betraying Lila Hayes was the biggest mistake of their lives. Le Fleur was more than just a restaurant, it was a microcosm of the elite world Lila had once inhabited. Every evening, the city's power players gathered within its opulent walls, CEOs of multinational corporations, influential politicians, celebrated artists, and socialites dripping in diamonds. They came not just for the exquisite food, but for the ambience, the exclusivity, the sense of belonging to something special. Lila, initially overwhelmed by the sheer extravagance of it all, slowly began to observe. She watched the way the servers interacted with the customers, the subtle nuances of their language, the way they anticipated needs before they were even voiced. She listened to the conversations, piecing together fragments of deals being made, alliances being forged, and reputations being shattered. She realized that Le Fleur was a stage, and everyone was playing a part. The customers were performing their roles of power and wealth, and the staff were performing the role of attentive and discreet servants. And beneath the surface, secrets simmered, ambitions clashed, and fortunes were made and lost. Antoine, despite his gruff exterior, proved to be a surprisingly valuable mentor. He saw something in Lila, a spark of intelligence and a willingness to learn. He taught her the intricacies of fine dining service, the proper way to pour wine, the art of remembering complex orders, and the importance of discretion. "This is not just about serving food, Lila," he said one evening, his voice low and serious. "It is about creating an experience. It is about making people feel important, powerful, and understood. And it is about listening, always listening." Lila took his words to heart. She studied the menu, learning the ingredients and preparation methods of each dish. She researched the wine list, memorizing the vintages and pairings. She paid attention to the details, the way the tables were set, the lighting, the music. Slowly, she began to excel. Her memory was sharp, her movements graceful, her smile genuine. She anticipated customers' needs, offering thoughtful suggestions and engaging in polite conversation. She learned to read people, to sense their moods and adapt her approach accordingly. She also listened. She listened to the snippets of conversations, the whispered secrets, the casual remarks that revealed so much about the people around her. She learned about their businesses, their investments, their personal lives. She began to piece together a mental map of the city's power structure, understanding who held the real influence and who was merely pretending. One evening, a particularly difficult customer, a notoriously demanding venture capitalist named Mr. Harding, was complaining about the wine. He claimed it was corked, even though it was a perfectly good bottle of vintage Bordeaux. The other servers avoided him like the plague, but Lila saw an opportunity. She approached his table with a calm smile. "Mr. Harding," she said, "I understand you're not happy with the wine. May I suggest an alternative? We have a 2010 Chateau Margaux that I believe would be more to your liking. It has a slightly different flavor profile, with notes of blackcurrant and cedar, and a smoother finish." Mr. Harding, surprised by her knowledge and confidence, agreed to try it. He took a sip, his eyes widened, and a rare smile spread across his face. "You know your wines, young lady," he said. "This is excellent." Lila had not only diffused a potentially volatile situation, but she had also impressed one of the city's most influential figures. From that moment on, Mr. Harding became a regular at Le Fleur, and he always asked for Lila to be his server. Her tips increased, and her confidence soared. She was no longer just a waitress, she was a valuable asset to Le Fleur, a trusted confidant of the city's elite. And with each passing day, she was learning, growing, and plotting her revenge. As Lila's skills and knowledge grew, so did her ambition. She realized that waiting tables, while providing a valuable learning experience, was not her ultimate goal. She wanted to be more than just a server, she wanted to be a player. She began to explore other avenues within Le Fleur, volunteering to help with administrative tasks, assisting the sommelier with wine selections, and even offering suggestions to the chef on new menu items. She proved to be a quick learner and a valuable asset, and she soon gained the trust and respect of the entire staff. One evening, while helping the restaurant manager, Madame Dubois, with inventory, Lila noticed a discrepancy in the accounts. A significant amount of money was unaccounted for, and the explanations offered by the bookkeeper seemed suspicious. Lila, remembering the financial acumen she had learned from her father, a successful entrepreneur, decided to investigate further. She spent hours poring over the books, meticulously tracking every transaction. She discovered a pattern of fraudulent activity, a scheme to embezzle funds from the restaurant. She presented her findings to Madame Dubois, who was shocked and grateful. Together, they confronted the bookkeeper, who confessed to his crimes and was promptly fired. Madame Dubois, deeply impressed by Lila's intelligence and initiative, offered her a new position, assistant manager. It was a significant step up, and Lila seized the opportunity with both hands. As assistant manager, Lila was responsible for a wide range of tasks, from managing staff schedules to overseeing inventory to handling customer complaints. She excelled in every area, demonstrating exceptional organizational skills, a keen eye for detail, and a natural ability to lead. She also continued to listen. She overheard conversations about business deals, investment opportunities, and political maneuvering. She learned about the strengths and weaknesses of the city's power players, their ambitions, their fears, their secrets. One particular conversation caught her attention. Two men, whom she recognized as prominent real estate developers, were discussing a struggling property in a prime location downtown. They were lamenting the fact that the current owner was unwilling to sell, even though the property was losing money. Lila, remembering her father's words, "Always look for opportunities where others see only problems," saw a chance to make her move. She knew that if she could acquire that property, she could turn it into something profitable, something that would put her on the map. She began to research the property, gathering information about its history, its finances, and its potential. She discovered that the owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hawthorne, was deeply attached to the building, which had been in her family for generations. She was reluctant to sell, even though she was struggling to keep it afloat. Lila realized that she couldn't simply offer Mrs. Hawthorne money. She needed to offer her something more, something that would appeal to her emotions and her sense of legacy. She decided to meet with Mrs. Hawthorne and learn more about her story. She discovered that Mrs. Hawthorne had a deep passion for the arts, and that she had always dreamed of turning the building into a cultural center, a place where artists could showcase their work and the community could gather. Lila saw an opportunity to fulfill Mrs. Hawthorne's dream, while also acquiring the property for herself. She proposed a plan. She would help Mrs. Hawthorne secure grants and funding to renovate the building and turn it into a thriving cultural center. In exchange, Mrs. Hawthorne would agree to sell the property to Lila at a reasonable price, with the condition that Lila would continue to operate it as a cultural center for at least 10 years. Mrs. Hawthorne, touched by Lila's sincerity and vision, agreed to the plan. Lila worked tirelessly to secure the necessary funding, leveraging her contacts at Le Fleur and her knowledge of the city's philanthropic circles. She organized fundraising events, wrote grant proposals, and networked with influential figures in the arts community. Within a few months, she had secured enough funding to begin the renovation. She hired local artists and contractors, and she worked closely with Mrs. Hawthorne to ensure that the building reflected her vision. The Hawthorne Cultural Center opened to rave reviews. It quickly became a hub for the city's arts community, attracting artists, patrons, and visitors from all over the world. Lila had not only acquired a valuable property, but she had also created something meaningful and lasting. Her success caught the attention of the city's business elite. She was invited to exclusive parties, offered lucrative investment opportunities, and courted by powerful figures who wanted to partner with her. Lila had finally arrived. She was no longer just a waitress, she was a rising star in the city's business world, a force to be reckoned with. And she was one step closer to achieving her ultimate goal, revenge on Ethan and Chloe. With her newfound success and influence, Lila began to transform herself. She shed the last vestiges of the naive and trusting girl she had once been, replacing her with a sophisticated, confident, and ruthless businesswoman. She hired a personal trainer to sculpt her body into a lean and powerful physique. She worked with a stylist to refine her wardrobe, choosing elegant and understated pieces that exuded confidence and authority. She took elocution lessons to perfect her speech, eliminating any traces of her former accent. She also invested in her education, taking courses in finance, real estate, and business management. She devoured books on strategy, negotiation, and psychology. She wanted to understand every aspect of the business world, to be able to outmaneuver her rivals and exploit their weaknesses. But the most significant change was in her demeanor. She learned to control her emotions, to mask her true feelings behind a facade of calm and composure. She became a master of manipulation, able to charm and disarm her opponents with ease. She also cultivated a network of allies, people who could provide her with information, resources, and support. She befriended journalists, politicians, lawyers, and even a few hackers. She understood that in the world of business, knowledge was power, and connections were currency. As she transformed herself, she never forgot her ultimate goal, revenge on Ethan and Chloe. She carefully monitored their activities, gathering information about their businesses, their relationships, and their weaknesses. Ethan, she learned, had inherited Sterling Enterprises after his father's sudden death. He was struggling to manage the company, making a series of poor investments and alienating key stakeholders. Chloe, meanwhile, had become a prominent socialite, known for her lavish parties and her scandalous affairs. Lila saw an opportunity to exploit their weaknesses and bring them down. She began to subtly undermine Ethan's business ventures, spreading rumors, leaking confidential information, and sabotaging deals. She also started to expose Chloe's infidelities, anonymously sending compromising photos and videos to her social circle. Their reputations began to crumble. Ethan's company suffered significant losses, and his investors started to lose confidence in him. Chloe's social standing plummeted, and she became the subject of ridicule and scorn. Lila watched their downfall with a cold satisfaction. But she knew that this was just the beginning. She wanted to do more than just damage their reputations, she wanted to destroy them completely. She devised a plan, a complex and intricate scheme that would exploit their greed, their ambition, and their arrogance. She would lure them into a trap, a situation where they would be forced to betray each other and ruin themselves. She knew that it would be a risky and dangerous game, but she was willing to do whatever it took to achieve her revenge. She had spent months, years even, building her power and influence, honing her skills, and preparing for this moment. It was time to put her plan into motion. It was time for Ethan and Chloe to pay for their betrayal. Lila's plan was multifaceted and meticulously crafted, designed to exploit Ethan and Chloe's individual vulnerabilities while simultaneously turning them against each other. The first step was to re-enter their lives, but not as the broken woman they remembered. She needed to present herself as someone they would envy and desire, someone who could offer them something they desperately needed. She started by attending a charity gala, an event she knew both Ethan and Chloe would be at. She made sure to arrive late, making an entrance that commanded attention. She wore a stunning gown, a custom-made creation that accentuated her newly sculpted figure. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She radiated confidence and success. Ethan's eyes widened when he saw her. He hadn't seen her since the day she walked out, and he was clearly taken aback by her transformation. He approached her cautiously, his voice hesitant. "Lila," he said, I didn't expect to see you here. You look amazing." Lila smiled coolly. "Ethan," she replied, "it's been a long time. You're looking well, too. Running a company clearly suits you." The last sentence dripped with a subtle sarcasm that only he seemed to notice. Chloe, who was standing nearby, bristled at the sight of Lila and Ethan talking. She sauntered over, her expression a mixture of surprise and disdain. "Lila, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What a surprise. I had no idea you were even in town. What have you been up to?" "Still waiting tables." Lila laughed, a light, melodious sound that grated on Chloe's nerves. "Actually, Chloe," she said, "I've been quite busy. I'm currently managing a portfolio of real estate investments, and I recently opened a cultural center that's been getting quite a bit of attention." Chloe's face paled slightly. She had clearly underestimated Lila. "Oh," she said, trying to regain her composure. "How interesting. Well, I'm sure it's nothing compared to what Ethan and I are doing. We're planning a major expansion of Sterling Enterprises, and we're about to become the biggest players in the industry." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's fascinating. I've heard rumors that Sterling Enterprises has been struggling lately. I hope you're not biting off more than you can chew." Ethan shot Chloe a warning glance. He didn't want Lila to know about their financial troubles. "Don't listen to her, Lila," he said. "Everything is going perfectly. We're on the verge of a major breakthrough." Lila smiled enigmatically. "I'm glad to hear it," she said. "I wish you both the best of luck. But I have to warn you, the business world can be a very dangerous place. You need to be careful who you trust." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan and Chloe to stew in their insecurities. She had planted the seeds of doubt and suspicion, and she knew they would begin to grow. Over the next few weeks, Lila continued to subtly manipulate Ethan and Chloe. She attended the same events, socialized with their friends, and casually dropped hints about their financial troubles and their personal indiscretions. She also made sure to be seen with other powerful and influential people, further enhancing her own reputation and increasing their envy. She was playing a dangerous game, but she was enjoying every minute of it. She knew that she was walking a tightrope, that one wrong move could expose her plan and ruin everything. But she was confident in her abilities, and she was determined to see her revenge through to the end. The next phase of her plan involved offering Ethan a lifeline, a way to save his company from financial ruin. She approached him with a proposal to invest in Sterling Enterprises, but with certain conditions. "I'm willing to inject a significant amount of capital into your company," she said, "but I need to have a controlling stake. I want to be the majority shareholder, and I want to have a say in how the company is run." Ethan was hesitant. He didn't want to give up control of his family's company, but he knew that he didn't have much of a choice. He was desperate, and Lila was his only hope. "I'll think about it," he said. "But I need to talk to Chloe first. She's my partner, and I can't make a decision like this without her input." Lila smiled inwardly. She knew that Chloe would never agree to the deal. She was too ambitious, too greedy, and too unwilling to share power. And that was exactly what Lila wanted. She wanted to drive a wedge between Ethan and Chloe, to pit them against each other, and to watch them tear each other apart. Meanwhile, Lila started a smear campaign against Chloe, she leaked to the press about the many infidelities she had during her relationship with Ethan. As Lila predicted, Chloe reacted with fury to the idea of Lila taking control of Sterling Enterprises. She saw it as a betrayal, a sign that Ethan was losing faith in her abilities. "You can't do this, Ethan," she screamed. "You can't let her take over our company. We've worked too hard for this." Ethan tried to calm her down, but Chloe was beyond reason. She accused him of being weak, of being easily manipulated by Lila. She threatened to leave him, to expose his secrets, and to ruin his reputation. Ethan, already stressed and overwhelmed, snapped. He lashed out at Chloe, accusing her of being selfish, of being more interested in her own ambition than in the success of the company. Their argument escalated into a full-blown fight, a screaming match that could be heard throughout their apartment. The cracks in their relationship, which had been simmering beneath the surface for months, finally burst open. Lila, who had been monitoring their every move, smiled. Her plan was working perfectly. She knew that it was time to make her final move. She arranged a meeting with Ethan and Chloe at Le Fleur, the very restaurant where she had started her journey of revenge. She arrived early, securing a private room in the back. She wanted to make sure that their conversation would be completely confidential. Ethan and Chloe arrived separately, their faces grim and their eyes filled with animosity. The tension in the room was palpable. Lila sat at the head of the table, her expression calm and composed. She had spent months preparing for this moment, rehearsing her lines, and anticipating every possible scenario. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I know this isn't easy for either of you. But I believe that we can find a solution that will benefit everyone." Ethan and Chloe glared at each other, unwilling to speak. Lila sighed. "Look," she said, "I know that you're both angry and frustrated. But we need to put our emotions aside and focus on the facts. Sterling Enterprises is in trouble, and you need my help. I'm willing to provide that help, but I need to be in control." Chloe scoffed. "And why should we trust you, Lila? You're just trying to take advantage of our situation. You're just trying to get revenge." Lila smiled. "Maybe," she said. "But I'm also trying to help you. I believe that I can turn Sterling Enterprises around, and I can make you both very wealthy in the process. But I can't do it unless you trust me and give me complete control." Ethan looked torn. He knew that Lila was right, but he couldn't bring himself to trust her completely. He was afraid that she would betray him, that she would use him to achieve her own ends. "I don't know, Lila," he said. "This is a big decision. I need more time to think about it." Lila shook her head. "There is no more time, Ethan," she said. "You need to make a decision now. If you don't accept my offer, I'm going to walk away, and you're going to lose everything." Chloe jumped in. "Don't listen to her, Ethan," she said. "She's bluffing. We don't need her. We can do this on our own." Lila turned to Chloe, her eyes narrowed. "Really, Chloe," she said. "Are you sure about that? Because I heard that you are the one who bankrupted the company from unnecessary expenses." Chloe's face flushed with anger. "That's a lie," she screamed. "I've done nothing but try to help this company." Lila smiled. "Is that so?" she said. "Then how do you explain this?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a file. She opened it and handed it to Ethan. He looked at the file, his eyes widening in shock. It contained evidence that Chloe had been embezzling money from Sterling Enterprises, using company funds for her own personal expenses. Ethan stared at Chloe, his face filled with disbelief and anger. "You did this," he said. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our company." Chloe tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. She broke down in tears, admitting her guilt. Ethan, consumed by fury, turned to Lila. "I accept your offer," he said. "Take over the company. Do whatever you want with it. Just get her out of my life." Lila smiled, her revenge complete. She had successfully manipulated Ethan and Chloe, turning them against each other and destroying their lives. "Very well," she said. "It's a deal." Lila took control of Sterling Enterprises, and she wasted no time in turning it around. She implemented a series of strategic changes, cutting costs, streamlining operations, and investing in new technologies. Within a few months, the company was profitable again. Its stock price soared, and Lila became a celebrated figure in the business world. Ethan, stripped of his power and his wealth, faded into obscurity. He became a pariah, shunned by his former friends and colleagues. He tried to rebuild his life, but he was haunted by his mistakes and his betrayal of Lila. Chloe, exposed as a fraud and a liar, suffered a similar fate. She lost her social standing, her friends, and her reputation. She was forced to leave the city, seeking refuge in a small town where no one knew her name. Lila had achieved her revenge. She had destroyed the lives of Ethan and Chloe, making them pay for their betrayal. But as she sat in her office, overlooking the city that she now dominated, she felt a strange sense of emptiness. She had achieved her goal, but the victory felt hollow. She realized that revenge, while satisfying in the short term, was ultimately a destructive force. It consumed her, turning her into someone she didn't want to be. She had become ruthless, manipulative, and cold. She had sacrificed her own happiness and well-being for the sake of revenge. She longed for the days when she was Lila Hayes, the naive and trusting girl who believed in love and friendship. She missed the simple things in life, the laughter, the companionship, the feeling of being loved. She realized that she had made a mistake. She had allowed her anger and her bitterness to consume her, blinding her to what was truly important in life. She decided to make a change. She resolved to leave the world of business, to focus on something more meaningful and fulfilling. She sold Sterling Enterprises, donating a portion of the proceeds to charity. She then moved to a small cottage by the sea, where she spent her days writing, painting, and gardening. She reconnected with old friends, repairing the relationships that she had neglected during her quest for revenge. She also forgave Ethan and Chloe, realizing that holding onto her anger was only hurting herself. She finally found peace and happiness. She learned that true fulfillment comes not from revenge, but from forgiveness, compassion, and love. She never forgot what happened to her, but she refused to let it define her. She learned from her mistakes, and she used her experiences to help others. She became a mentor to young women, encouraging them to pursue their dreams and to never let anyone take advantage of them. She also became an advocate for victims of betrayal, offering them support and guidance. Lila Hayes, the broken-hearted waitress, had transformed herself into a powerful and inspiring woman. She had achieved her revenge, but she had also learned a valuable lesson, that forgiveness is the ultimate victory. Years later, Lila received a letter. It was from Ethan. He wrote of his struggles, his regrets, and his eventual finding of peace. He thanked her, not for the. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and share your thoughts.